I still remember the exact shade of crimson that crept up my neck when Victoria Langford announced it in front of the entire executive team. Not in private. Not with any semblance of dignity. Right there in the conference room, with the morning sun streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting her perfectly styled blonde hair in an almost angelic glow that made the moment feel even more surreal. "Jenny won't be leading the Garrison Industries negotiation," she said, her voice carrying that particular smugness that only comes from someone who's convinced they've made a brilliant decision. "I'm putting Charles Brenner on it instead. He's tougher than you, Jenny. No offense, but this deal requires someone with a harder edge. No offense." As if those two words could cushion the blow of being publicly humiliated in front of colleagues I'd worked alongside for 6 years at WestEnd Technologies. I felt my face burn hotter. Around the table, eyes darted away from mine, some embarrassed for me, others clearly relieved it wasn't them in the crosshairs. Only Peter Kavanagh, our CFO, looked directly at me with something resembling sympathy. But he said nothing. No one did. Charles sat 2 seats down from me, and I could feel his satisfaction radiating like heat off asphalt in July. He didn't even try to hide the smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. We'd been competing for the senior director position for months, and Victoria had just handed him the golden ticket. The Garrison contract was worth $42 million over 3 years, the kind of deal that made careers, the kind that got you promoted, the kind that I'd spent 4 months cultivating from a cold lead into a hot prospect. 4 months of research. 4 months of relationship building. 4 months of late nights and early mornings, of understanding every nuance of Garrison's needs, of positioning WestEnd as not just a vendor but a strategic partner. I knew their pain points better than they did. I knew that their CTO, Helen Kowalski, was risk-averse but innovation-hungry. I knew their CEO, Frank Garrison, valued long-term relationships over quick wins. I knew their procurement director, Anthony Diaz, had been burned by aggressive sales tactics in the past and responded better to consultative approaches. I knew everything about this deal. And now I was being benched. "Jenny will transition all her notes and research to Charles by end of day," Victoria continued, already moving on to the next agenda item as if she hadn't just gutted me professionally. "Charles, the first negotiation session is scheduled for Thursday. I trust you'll bring the aggression we need to close this." Aggression. That word stuck in my mind like a splinter. I went back to my office, a modest space with a view of the parking lot rather than the city skyline that the VPs enjoyed, and sat in the silence for exactly 3 minutes. Then I opened my laptop and began compiling everything I knew about Garrison Industries into a document for Charles. Every note. Every insight. Every carefully observed preference and personality quirk. I was thorough because that's who I am, even when I'm being stabbed in the back. My mother always said that integrity means doing the right thing even when it costs you, and apparently, I'd inherited her stubbornness along with her green eyes. Charles showed up at my office around 4 o'clock, leaning against the doorframe with his arms crossed. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of square jaw and confident posture that made people assume competence even when it wasn't there. "So, heard you're handing off your baby," he said with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm sending you everything," I replied evenly, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing me rattled. "The document should be in your inbox in the next hour." "Victoria's right, you know," he said, stepping into my office uninvited. "This deal needs someone who can push back, someone who won't fold when things get tough. Garrison's team is going to come in aggressive on pricing. They need to see strength." I looked up at him, really looked at him, and saw exactly what he was, a man who confused volume with value, who thought intimidation was the same as influence. "Garrison doesn't respond well to aggression," I said carefully. "I've spent months building rapport with their team. They're looking for a partner, not a fighter." Charles laughed, a short, dismissive bark. "That's your problem, Jenny. You think business is about making friends. It's not. It's about winning. And that's what I do." After he left, I sat there as the sun dipped lower, painting my mediocre view in shades of orange and gold. I thought about all the times I'd been told I was too soft for this industry. Too collaborative. Too focused on relationships. As if those things were weaknesses rather than the exact skills that had brought WestEnd some of its most loyal, long-term clients. But maybe Victoria was right. Maybe I wasn't tough enough. Maybe in a world that valued aggression and bravado, my approach was outdated. I finished the transition document and hit send at 6:47 p.m. Then I went home to my apartment, poured a glass of wine I barely tasted, and let myself feel the full weight of the humiliation. Thursday came. The day of the first negotiation session with Garrison Industries. I wasn't invited, obviously. Charles was leading it with Victoria observing. I spent the morning working on other accounts, trying to focus, trying not to think about the meeting happening 2 floors up in the executive conference room. Around 11, my phone buzzed. A text from Peter, "How are you holding up?" "Fine," I typed back, which was a lie, but what else could I say? For what it's worth, I think she made a mistake. I stared at those words for a long time but didn't respond. What was the point? The decision was made. Lunchtime came and went. I ate a salad at my desk that tasted like cardboard and regret. Around 2 o'clock, I saw Charles walking past my office with Victoria, both heading toward the elevators. Their body language seemed positive, animated gestures, Victoria nodding along to whatever Charles was saying. Maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe his approach was working. That thought hurt more than I expected. Friday passed in a blur of routine work. The weekend was a welcome escape. I went hiking with my college roommate, Stephanie, who listened to my venting with patient understanding and reminded me that my worth wasn't determined by one VP's poor judgment. Monday morning, I arrived at the office at 7:30, my usual time. The building was still mostly empty, just the early birds like me and the cleaning crew finishing their rounds. I made coffee in the break room, the familiar ritual soothing in its mundanity. By 9 o'clock, the office was humming with its typical Monday energy. I was responding to emails when I heard it, a sound that made everyone in the vicinity freeze. Victoria Langford was screaming. Not just speaking loudly. Screaming. "Where is she? Where's Jenny?" My stomach dropped. I looked up to see Victoria storming through the corridor toward my office, her face flushed an alarming shade of red, her carefully composed exterior completely shattered. Behind her, scrambling to keep up, was Charles, looking pale and stricken. She slammed into my office without knocking, and the force of it rattled the framed photo of my parents on the shelf. "Why did we lose the contract?" she demanded, her voice shaking with rage. "What did you tell them? What did you do?" I stood slowly, my heart pounding but my voice steady. "I haven't spoken to anyone at Garrison since you took me off the deal." "That's impossible." Victoria's hands were trembling. "They just sent an email. They're going with Datacore Solutions instead. After we were so close." After, she seemed to choke on her words. "They specifically said they didn't feel WestEnd was the right cultural fit anymore." "What does that even mean?" I glanced past her at Charles, who couldn't meet my eyes. Something cold and clarifying settled in my chest. "What happened in the negotiation?" I asked quietly. "That's not relevant," Victoria snapped. "What's relevant is that we just lost $42 million, and I need to know if you sabotaged." "I would never." The words came out harder than I intended, and Victoria actually took a step back. "I have never, in my entire career, sabotaged a deal. But I did warn Charles that Garrison doesn't respond well to aggressive tactics." Victoria's eyes narrowed. She turned to Charles. "What did you do?" Charles shifted uncomfortably. "I took a strong position on pricing, like we discussed. I pushed back on their initial terms. I made it clear we weren't going to be pushed around." "You bullied them," I said, the pieces clicking into place. "Didn't you?" "I negotiated firmly," Charles insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. "Let me guess," I continued, my voice gaining strength. "You challenged Helen Kowalski in front of her team. You dismissed Frank Garrison's concerns about long-term support. You treated Anthony Diaz like an obstacle instead of an ally." The look on Charles's face told me everything. Victoria was staring at him now, her fury finding a new target. "Is that true?" "I was establishing dominance," Charles said desperately. "You said you wanted someone tough, someone who wouldn't fold." "I wanted someone who could close the deal." Victoria's voice cracked. "Not someone who would alienate a $42 million client with ego-driven posturing." The silence that followed was deafening. Down the hall, I could sense people trying very hard to pretend they weren't listening while absolutely listening to every word. Victoria turned back to me, and I saw something I'd never seen in her expression before: uncertainty. Can you fix this? She asked, and the smugness from that conference room meeting was completely gone, replaced by something that looked almost like desperation. I took a slow breath. This was the moment. The moment where I could either step back in and save the deal, save her career, probably, and Charles's too, or I could let it burn. I can try, I said finally. But I need you to understand something first. Victoria waited, and I could see her jaw clench with impatience, but she stayed quiet. The reason I've been successful with clients like Garrison isn't because I'm soft or because I make friends instead of doing business. It's because I understand that business is fundamentally about people. It's about trust and partnership and showing up consistently with integrity. You can't bully your way into a long-term relationship. You can't intimidate someone into trusting you. I looked at Charles, then back at Victoria. Toughness isn't about aggression. It's about having the courage to be honest, to be vulnerable when necessary, to admit what you don't know and to ask for help when you need it. It's about being strong enough to let someone else win a point so you can win the relationship. Victoria's expression was unreadable. For a moment, I thought she might explode again. Instead, she nodded slowly. Call them, she said. Call Helen Kowalski. See if you can get us a meeting. I waited until they left my office before I allowed myself to exhale. My hands were shaking slightly, adrenaline, probably, but my mind was clear. I looked at the phone on my desk. I could call Helen. I probably could get a meeting. I'd built enough goodwill over the past 4 months that she might be willing to hear me out. But should I? I thought about Victoria's public humiliation of me. I thought about Charles's smirk. I thought about all the times I'd been told I wasn't enough, not tough enough, not aggressive enough, not whatever enough to succeed in this world. Then I thought about Helen Kowalski, who had spent 30 minutes on our last call before all this happened, talking about her daughter's college search. I thought about Frank Garrison, who had mentioned he was looking for a vendor who would grow with them over decades. I thought about Anthony Diaz, who had explicitly said he was tired of working with companies that treated procurement like a battle. I picked up the phone. Helen answered on the third ring. Jenny Correl, she said, and I couldn't quite read her tone. I wondered if I'd hear from you. Helen, I owe you an apology, I began. The way that negotiation went on Thursday, that wasn't representative of WestEnd Technologies or the partnership I've been trying to build with you and your team. I'll be honest, Jenny, I was shocked, Helen said. The person you sent was nothing like you. He came in acting like we should be grateful for the opportunity to work with WestEnd. He questioned our budget allocations. He implied that Frank didn't understand the technical requirements of his own company. I closed my eyes. It was worse than I'd imagined. He's not leading this anymore, I said. I am. If you'll give me the chance, I'd like to start over. Not back at the beginning, but from a place of mutual respect and understanding. There was a long pause. I could hear Helen typing in the background, probably checking her calendar, probably calculating whether this was worth her time. Why did they replace you in the first place? She asked finally. The question caught me off guard. I could lie. I could make up something diplomatic. But I'd just given Victoria a speech about integrity, and I meant it. My VP thought I wasn't tough enough, I said honestly. She thought the negotiation needed someone more aggressive. Helen laughed, a short, sharp sound. And how did that work out for her? Not well. Jenny, I'm going to be straight with you because I think you've earned it. We liked working with you. We trusted you. But when your company sent someone who clearly didn't respect us or the work we'd already done together, it made us question whether WestEnd was really the partner we thought you were. It made us wonder if you were the exception or the rule. Her words hit hard because they were true. One person's behavior had contaminated 4 months of careful relationship building. I understand, I said. And if I'm being completely honest, I can't guarantee that WestEnd's culture is exactly what you're looking for. But I can guarantee that if you work with me, I will show up with the same respect and partnership I've shown from day one. I will fight for you internally. I will make sure you're treated like the valuable partner you are. Another pause. Longer this time. I'll talk to Frank and Anthony, Helen said finally. No promises. But I'll talk to them. Call me tomorrow afternoon. Thank you, I breathed. Really, Helen? Thank you. After we hung up, I sat back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. I'd bought us a chance. Maybe. Possibly. If Helen could convince Frank and Anthony that I was worth another shot. Victoria appeared at my door 20 minutes later. Her earlier fury had cooled into something more controlled but no less intense. Well, she asked. I spoke with Helen Kowalski. She's going to discuss it with Frank Garrison and Anthony Diaz. I'm calling her back tomorrow afternoon. Victoria nodded slowly. And if they agree to meet? Then I lead the negotiation, I said firmly. My way. No interference. No second guessing. You let me do what I should have been allowed to do from the start. I watched her process this, watched her pride war with her desperation. The deal was too big to lose. We both knew it. Fine, she said finally. But, Jenny, if you pull this off, we need to have a conversation about your future here. She left before I could respond, which was probably for the best because I wasn't sure what I would have said. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the conversation with Helen, analyzing every word, every pause, trying to predict what she was thinking. Around midnight, I gave up on sleep and went to my kitchen, making tea I didn't really want just to have something to do with my hands. My phone rang. Stephanie, probably checking in. Hey, I answered. I just had a feeling you'd be awake, she said. How bad is it? I told her everything, the screaming, the confrontation, the phone call with Helen. Stephanie listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I love most about her. You know what I think, she said when I finished. I think you're going to save this deal. And then you're going to leave WestEnd Technologies. The second part surprised me. Leave? Jenny, they publicly humiliated you. They replaced you on your own deal. And now they're asking you to clean up their mess. Even if you pull this off, especially if you pull this off, do you really want to keep working somewhere that doesn't value you until they need you? I didn't have an answer for that. Not yet. Tuesday afternoon, I called Helen at exactly 3 o'clock. We'll meet with you, she said without preamble. Thursday at 10. But Jenny, this is it. One meeting. You have one shot to convince us that WestEnd is worth the risk. I'll be there, I promised. And Helen? Thank you for giving us another chance. Don't thank me yet, she replied. Frank is still pretty angry. The next 36 hours were a blur of preparation. I reviewed every note, every conversation, every detail I'd gathered over the past 4 months. I created a presentation that wasn't really a presentation, more like a conversation guide, highlighting where our solutions aligned with their needs, acknowledging where we'd fallen short, proposing a path forward built on transparency and partnership. Charles tried to approach me on Wednesday. I saw him hovering near my office, clearly wanting to say something. I didn't give him the chance. Whatever he wanted, apology, advice, absolution, I didn't have the energy for it. Thursday morning, I dressed carefully. Not in armor-like power suits, but in the professional yet approachable style that had always felt authentic to me. Navy blazer, cream blouse, tailored pants. Comfortable heels I could walk confidently in. Victoria wanted to come to the meeting. I told her no. This needs to be a reset, I explained. They need to see that I'm leading this, that this is a genuine partnership, not a corporate power play. I could see her struggling with it, but ultimately, she agreed. Probably because she knew I was right. Probably because she had no choice. I arrived at Garrison Industries headquarters 15 minutes early. The building was modern glass and steel, with an atrium full of natural light and living trees. Helen met me in the lobby, her expression professionally neutral. They're waiting in the conference room, she said. Jenny, I should warn you, Frank is considering this meeting a courtesy more than a negotiation. I understand. We walked through corridors lined with photos of Garrison's history, started by Frank's grandfather in 1967, grown from a small manufacturing outfit to a mid-sized tech company with 300 employees. There was pride in these walls, legacy. The kind of thing you don't build with aggressive negotiation tactics. The conference room was smaller than I expected, more intimate. Frank Garrison sat at the head of the table, late 50s, gray hair, sharp eyes that assessed me immediately. Anthony Diaz was to his left, younger, arms crossed, clearly skeptical. Ms. Correl, Frank said, his voice cool. Helen tells me you'd like to start over. I sat down across from him, maintaining eye contact. Mr. Garrison, I want to apologize. The way you were treated in last week's meeting was unacceptable. It was disrespectful to you, to your team, and to the relationship we'd been building. You deserved better. Frank's expression didn't change, but I saw something flicker in his eyes. Interest, maybe. Your colleague seemed to think we were negotiating from a position of weakness, Anthony said. He treated this like we should be begging to work with WestEnd. He was wrong, I said simply. This is a partnership, not a power dynamic. You're evaluating us just as much as we're proposing solutions. More, actually. Because you're the one taking the risk of trusting a vendor with critical systems. I opened my laptop, but I didn't immediately jump into the presentation. Before we talk about proposals and pricing and implementation timelines, I want to ask you something, I continued. What made you consider WestEnd in the first place? Back when this was just an initial conversation? Helen glanced at Frank, who leaned back in his chair. You listened, he said after a moment. Most vendors come in trying to sell us what they have. You asked questions. You wanted to understand our business, not just push your products. That hasn't changed, I said. I still want to understand. So let me ask, what would success look like for you with this partnership? Not just technically, but strategically. 3 years from now, what does a successful relationship with your technology partner look like? And then I did something Charles never would have done. I stopped talking and listened. Frank talked about scalability and trust. Helen discussed innovation balanced with stability. Anthony mentioned responsiveness and transparency. I took notes. I asked follow-up questions. I didn't defend or justify or sell. An hour in, the energy in the room had shifted. We were talking collaboratively, building on each other's ideas. When I finally walked through my proposal, it wasn't a pitch, it was a conversation about how we could solve their challenges together. Your pricing is higher than Datacore's, Anthony pointed out. It is, I agreed. Because we're proposing a more comprehensive support structure and longer-term strategic planning. But I'm open to discussing what components are most valuable to you. If our full package doesn't fit your budget, let's talk about what does while still delivering the core value you need. Frank looked at Helen, then at Anthony. Some silent communication passed between them. Give us a moment, Frank said. I stepped outside the conference room, my heart pounding. This was it. Either they'd give us another chance, or 4 months of work, and this entire week of emotional turmoil, would end with a polite rejection. Helen opened the door 5 minutes later. Come back in, Jenny. I sat down, trying to read their faces and finding nothing conclusive. Frank leaned forward, hands clasped on the table. We're willing to move forward with WestEnd. But I need your personal guarantee that you're leading this project, not your aggressive colleague. Relief flooded through me, so intense I almost felt dizzy. You have my commitment. This is my project, and I will personally oversee every aspect of our partnership. Then let's talk about next steps, Frank said, and for the first time since I'd entered the room, he smiled. I called Victoria from my car before I even left Garrison's parking lot. We have the deal, I said. There was a pause, then, you're serious. They're sending over the signed contract by end of week. We start implementation in November. Victoria exhaled loudly. Jenny, this is excellent work. Outstanding. When you're back in the office, we need to discuss. My compensation, I interrupted. And my title. And my autonomy. Another pause. We can talk about that. No, I said, surprised by my own firmness. We will decide on that. Because Victoria, I just saved a $42 million deal that your decision-making nearly destroyed. I've proven my value. Now I need you to recognize it properly. I heard her breathing on the other end of the line. When she spoke again, her voice was different, not quite humble, but chastened. You're right. Let's set up a meeting for Monday morning. After we hung up, I sat in my car and let myself feel everything. The victory, yes, but also the anger that had been simmering underneath my professional composure all week. The hurt of being publicly dismissed. The frustration of having to prove myself again after years of consistent performance. But underneath all of that, something else, certainty. I knew my worth now in a way I hadn't before. Not because Victoria or Charles or anyone else recognized it, but because I'd stood in that conference room and led with authenticity and strength, my version of strength, not theirs, and it had worked. Monday morning came. I walked into Victoria's office at 9 sharp, carrying a folder with documentation of my contributions to WestEnd over the past 6 years. Deals closed, clients retained, revenue generated. The numbers were impressive even to me. Victoria gestured to a chair. "I've been thinking about our conversation." "So have I," said, sitting down. "I want the senior director position. I want a 15% salary increase. And I want final authority over my deals and my team." I saw her jaw tighten. "That's aggressive." "No," I corrected. "That's what I've earned. And if WestEnd isn't prepared to recognize that, I'm confident other companies will be interested in someone who just saved a $42 million contract." It wasn't a bluff. Over the weekend, I'd updated my resume and reached out to 2 recruiters I knew. I wasn't sure I wanted to leave WestEnd, but I was absolutely sure I wouldn't stay if nothing changed. Victoria opened her own folder, pulling out what looked like a formal document. "I discussed this with the executive team over the weekend. We're prepared to offer you Senior Director of Client Partnerships. 12% raise, effective immediately. And you'll have final authority over deals within your portfolio." It wasn't everything I'd asked for, but it was close. More importantly, it was recognition. "I want it in writing," I said. "And I want an explicit statement that I have full autonomy in client negotiations." Done. We spent the next 20 minutes going through details, new responsibilities, team structure, reporting lines. When I left her office, I had a signed offer letter and something I hadn't felt in weeks: professional respect. Charles was waiting near my office. He looked like he hadn't slept well, dark circles under his eyes. "Jenny, I wanted to apologize," he started. I held up a hand. "I appreciate that, but I'm not interested in an apology. What I am interested in is making sure this doesn't happen again, to me or anyone else. So here's what's going to happen: you're going to attend my next 3 client meetings. You're going to observe. You're going to learn that there's more than one way to be effective in this business." He looked like he wanted to argue, but something in my expression must have convinced him otherwise. "Okay. Yeah, I can do that." "Good. First one is Wednesday." That evening, I met Stephanie for dinner at our favorite Italian restaurant. Over pasta and wine, I told her everything. "So you're staying?" she asked. "For now," I said. "I negotiated what I needed, and I think, maybe, I've made a point that needed making. Not just for me, but about how leadership should work." Stephanie raised her glass. "To being tough enough." I clinked my glass against hers. "To redefining what tough means." As I walked home later that night, the city lights reflecting off wet pavement from an earlier rain, I thought about the past 2 weeks. The humiliation. The anger. The moment of standing in Victoria's office and demanding my worth. I thought about Helen Kowalski answering my call when she had every reason not to. About Frank Garrison giving me a second chance. About the difference between aggression and assertion, between making friends and building partnerships. The truth is, I'm not the same person who sat in that conference room 2 weeks ago, feeling my face burn with shame. That version of me wondered if maybe Victoria was right, if maybe I wasn't tough enough for this world. The person I am now knows better. I know that my approach, built on empathy, relationship, and authentic connection, isn't a weakness. It's my superpower. It's what saved the Garrison deal. It's what will build my career. I'm tough enough. I always was. I just needed to believe it myself.